Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Mental Mix. It is currently a Saturday night. I'm recording this. Well, technically, it's Sunday because I'm recording this at 12:47 a.m. But as always, I have a lot to say. And some things have just been on my mind that have not allowed me to go to sleep. So I want to share them with you guys because I think that they could be valuable to at least one person. And for me, that's enough to record an episode for. So, what has been on my mind to encapsulate the theme for today's episode is that I used to think that stability in things like routines, everything being the same, stuff like that, I used to think that stability brought happiness. And now I know that it's not stability, but change that does, and adaptability. I used to really hate change because I think it was mostly I felt fear of the future as a child, loss of control, anxiety, and just like a certain resistance to whatever was to come. I know that typically, stereotypically, like children are seen as very carefree, but in my childhood, I used to feel um an immense desire to become an adult. Why? Because I wanted control over certain situations that I did not have any control over as a child, like what we were going to do, what plans we had in the day, if we could leave somewhere, if could even things like control over my emotions, because I was self-aware as a child of the fact that if I was going through something emotionally, that I wasn't prepared to handle it because of how young I was and because of how naive I was. And I felt that whenever I had like tantrums and things like that, I felt embarrassed because I was like, I'm having all these large emotions, these big emotions, and I don't know how to process them and deal with them. And those things give me anxiety. And anything regarding change and a different set of plans and what I wanted would bring me a lot of anxiety. And since then, I realized how much energy I spent worrying on what was to come instead of embracing what was going on in the moment. As of lately, I've been embracing a lot of change. Like I told you guys in the last episode, with transitioning to college and things like that. I even have an episode from a while ago called Embracing Change Through Mentality, I think, or Embracing Growth Through Mentality, something like that. I have a lot of episodes, honestly, on change and growth because they're two constantly emerging subjects in mental health. And that's what this podcast is all about at the end of the day, because that's what I love to talk about. But change is something that as I get older, I learn to embrace and I learn to love because ultimately change has changed my life for the positive. And I'll explain this further because I feel like I've said the word change 50 million times now. But for example, if I never got into sports in middle school, I wouldn't have made a lot of the lifelong friends that I have right now. If I would have never started my internship with my aunt in dentistry, I never would have realized that that career that I thought on a whim maybe would be for me was what exactly what I want to do. Things like this, like every time that something in my life unexpectedly ended, whether or not I realized it, something new, essential to me, started. Of course, a big example of this would be my parents' divorce. This is something I try to avoid talking about on my podcast, but it's something very normal and very common, a very, very shared experience. So, of course, growing up, a child with extreme anxiety, I mean, I wouldn't say extreme, but moderate anxiety and a big fear of different developments of what I wanted and things like that. My parents' separation was a big thing for me, and it was really difficult to process and deal with. considering all the emotions that come with things like that. Potentially guilt. Am I at fault for what's going on? No, I wasn't, but that was on my mind. What's going to happen? And there's a lot of uncertainty with that. Are my parents going to hate each other? Are my parents going to speak to each other? Am I going to have to move houses? Am I going to have more siblings? Things like this, they're difficult for an 11, 12-year-old to deal with. I have a younger sister. I can imagine that navigating those feelings was also difficult for her. I mean, I know it was. And some things that happen, like for instance, my parents' divorce, at first don't work out and they don't make sense. But later you realize that they make sense and that happened for a reason. And not just with my parents' divorce, but with every situation that I've had to go through that was something that later changed, that I stopped having to do, something that I had to leave a certain group, that I had to leave a certain routine that I had. I later realized that I survived every single version of myself that I thought I couldn't. I went through dealing with my parents' divorce. I went through dealing with feeling like I had no friends. And all these things just made me stronger. So ask yourself, what has changed given you that staying the same in your life could not? And because of that, what version of you exists now that couldn't have existed if those things hadn't happened? Once you shift your perspective, oh my gosh, I just thought of the TikTok sound. And they say when you shift your perspective, that's when miracles happen. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. But once you change your perspective, you realize that you can see change as sort of a mirror. It shows you who you are. It shows you that you, as a person, tackling different scenarios, 99% of your experiences is what you think about them, what you perceive about them. 1% is the stimulus. So it's a mirror because it shows you who is capable of dealing with the stuff that's going on, yourself. And what are you going to do about it? You know? Change is also like, how can I say? It's like a filter. It removes anything that hasn't been serving purpose in your life and adds what should. I love removing things on social media that I don't like seeing anymore. I love blocking and removing and deleting photos I don't want, removing apps, just unnecessary clutter. Change when you reorganize your room, things like that, like feng shui type stuff, like that all helps you remove older versions of you and focus on the present and look forward to the future. Change is also lastly like a teacher. It forces you to grow. It forces you to develop into the person you're meant to be to reach your full potential. And honestly, resisting change in your life, whether that be something happening to you, your own personality, often can cause us more pain than just the act of letting it happen itself. And discomfort doesn't always equal danger. We have to tell that to ourselves because it's wired into our nervous system. This is something new. This is something bad. No, don't tell that to yourself. You have to almost rewire your brain because unfamiliarity doesn't equal that something is wrong. And that is something that I've had to learn over the course of the past few years. And I'm only 18, so I have a lot more learning to do. When things like this happen to me, where I feel uncertain and I feel like I don't know what's going to happen, I'm worried, blah, 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 I try to think of past scenarios, like the ones I just mentioned, and how I got through them and how I ultimately came out better. And that immediately makes me feel a lot more relieved. Or I think of like how far I've come and how hard I've worked to come to where I am, and how, regardless of all my obstacles, I don't let things stop me, and how that's never going to change. because like I said, I see change as a mirror, and I see that I've been able to get through all these situations because of change. So I know that in the future, that will remain constant. I am a constant, and all these things are just passing by. But I'm also growing because change is the only constant in my life. And I'm perfectly okay with that. And once you accept that, your perspective on the things going on will completely change. You can let feelings exist in your brain of anxiety without feeling like you have to fix them, because you can acknowledge that your thoughts are just thoughts. That's all they are. They're not real, and you're completely capable of controlling them. Clarity comes after motion, after something happens. And if you let parts of your life, if you let certain chapters that you left unfinished, or you feel like you want closure, just let them happen, because you don't always need full closure. That peace, that relaxation, and that clarity will come with time. So I challenge you guys to kind of ask yourselves, what things are you guys holding on to out of fear of the future that that you think deep down you could benefit from letting them go? And I also challenge yourself to think to yourself, what if possibly, and this is true, I'm just asking you to tell this to yourself, because I know that it's true, at least for me, maybe not for you, but what if change is happening for you, for a purpose instead of to you? You know, it's kind of just shifting from that victim mindset. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And remember that growth doesn't always mean comfort, and change can be scary, but that anxiety from change doesn't have to control you, and change can ultimately and will ultimately be a positive thing for your own personal growth. I hope you guys enjoyed my late night deep thoughts, and I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week. Bye.